Eerst even naar onze kijkers thuis. Goedemiddag allemaal. En als je op On Demand kijkt, goed moment van de dag dat je kijkt. Twee dingetjes evident. Vandaag niet aanwezig Erwin Blom. Helaas vertraagd en niet in de aanwezigheid van deze show. Wel aanwezig Johan Voets, dat ben ik. Deze show is een samenwerking tussen False Moving Targets van Erwin en Dutch Cowboys. Het andere evidente wat jullie gaat opvallen is dat we zo dadelijk overschakelen naar het Engelse. En dat heeft alles te maken met onze gast van vandaag. So, once again, hi there and welcome to this very special Dutch Cowboys Fast Moving Targets collaboration. Our English language today has everything to do with our guest. And at the age of 25, he's undoubtedly one of the most influential people on the internet. With his company valued at $800 million and home to more than 53 million blogs, I've heard. Under them, not only the classics like Madman Unbuttoned, Accidental Chinese Hipsters, and Kim Jong-il Looking at Things, but also home to stars like Beyoncé, John Mayer, Donald Glover and Zooey Deschanel. Of course, I'm talking about Tumblr, and we're very honored to be joined by David Karp.
Thank you so much for having me today. Really excited to be here.
We're very excited to have you here. So when did you fly in?
Just yesterday. Yeah, this is second day in Amsterdam.
Did you have a chance to take a look at the city already? Or?
A little bit. We got to run around last night. It's extraordinary, an absolutely beautiful place.
Cool.
Yeah.
So how long are you in for?
We're going to be here through Friday. So yeah, just this week.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. Well, you're here for the launch of the Dutch version of Tumblr.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And I will get to that in a little bit. But first I want to know a little bit more about yourself. Is that
Sure.
okay? Cool,
Yeah, please.
Cool. You turned out quite to be a globetrotter on an early age. I heard you moved to Tokyo when you were 17?
A little bit, yeah. So I didn't see many places when I was a kid, but when I was 18, I had just recently. So I'd been studying Japanese for a few years. I dropped out of high school, but I kept taking Japanese classes at a really great school in New York. And like right around my 18th birthday, I just had my heart like really badly broken, and I'm like, I got to get out of here as far as I can get. And I bought tickets and was in Japan 2 weeks later.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I lived in Tokyo for just under a year.
For just under a year.
Mm-hmm.
And the story goes that you were there. You were trying to fix some clients programming robots.
Oh, yeah, so let's see. Well, no, so this was at a time in my life where I was like obsessed with AI and robotics, and I thought, what better place in the world to be than Japan for that? I was actually, most of the work I was doing was for U.S. companies. I was still employed full-time for a company in the U.S. called Urban Baby. It was sort of a social network for moms and parents. And I was working for them for 3 years, and I was about a year and a half in when I picked up and moved to Japan. It was right around the time that IP telephony had come about. So I was able to just plug this little box into a high-speed internet connection and have my New York phone number, and nobody had any idea where I was.
Oh, that is pretty cool. So you moved back to NYC when you were...
I did. I was just about to turn 19, I think,
really?
And I was back in the city.
And you founded Tumblr in 2007 when you were 21?
That's right. So actually, as soon as I came back to New York, I started hanging out with some of the people I'd been working with previously, some of my connections out there, and I ended up starting my little web development shop when I was, I think, 19.
Really?
This was in 2005, yeah, called Davidville.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And you started from, the story goes, from your mother's bedroom.
That's right.
They say.
Yeah, well, from a bedroom in my mother's apartment.
Right,
yeah.
Right. Okay, cool.
And I worked on that for a couple of years, and then that Tumblr was one of our side projects. So we launched a few of these products. The first one, actually, before Tumblr, that gets a little less attention is, definitely a little less attention, is called Senduit, which was a little file sharing service. And we launched that, and then we launched Tumblr about a year and a half into this little development company. And a few months after that, we switched over to Tumblr full-time.
How did you came to the format of Tumblr at that time?
It was something, I was noodling on for a pretty long time. So I'd wanted to blog forever. I owned my domain name, davidslog.com, for many more years than I've owned tumblr.com. And it was something that for a long time I wanted to use. I wanted to have something on the internet that was me, that I was proud of, that I could put on my business card, that people could Google, that I could put on my resume. And if you remember 2004, 2005, that had become a more mainstream idea. The idea of being a pro blogger or putting your blog address on your resume was like a mainstream idea. It was something that more and more people were taking to. And I wanted it. I wanted it so badly. I wanted to be like my guys like Jason Fried and John Gruber and Kottke, who were just these prolific, interesting people with a great personality and profile online. I tried all of the tools. I tried Blogger, I tried WordPress, I tried Typepad. The longest I ever kept up was on Blogger for about 3 months. And I just kept falling down with all of these services. And after a while, I realized, it's really that I'm not a writer. I can write, but I don't enjoy sitting down at the end of the day to spend an hour like writing an editorial, journal entry or newspaper piece, kind of like what blogging was at the time. And then I stumbled onto this community of people calling themselves Tumblogers. And they were experimenting with this sort of novel format for a blog that actually, to be honest, looks much more like where blogging started, back when you had a GeoCities page or like an AOL profile, and it was just sort of a mishmash of all of these different pieces of media, and they would stack up to make this really interesting just thread of things that were interesting to the author, rather than their editorial voice. It was like a raw look through their eyes. So anyway, I stumbled onto this community in 2005, and what I saw in it was they were replacing the editorial voice with this beautiful presentation that kind of gave enough context to what they were posting. So if it was a photo, it was just, this big, beautiful framed photo with maybe a little caption underneath it. They would take just a quote, not even a whole article, not even necessarily a link, just blow the quote up really big and designed it beautifully so it could stand on its own. And they use this really beautiful aesthetic sensibility to, kind of paint this, again, very raw story told by the author rather than the long editorial. And I loved it. I saw that and I said, that's what I wanted.
That's what I built. Okay, pretty cool. So we had a chat just before the show, and we were talking about obstacles as an entrepreneur or as a startup. What was the hardest obstacle you had to overcome in those first few weeks or months?
Oh, I think it's all... The hardest issues are always people issues, and I've been incredibly fortunate to get to work with incredible people who have been, that I have an amazing relationship with, that I trust tremendously, who are unbelievably talented. I mean, much more talented than I am. But I mean, just the people issues of accepting that, oh my God, we need to hire more people to do everything that we want to get done. I was so happy to have this tight little team of my buddies for so long. And, that ended up actually kind of really costing us, the fact that I couldn't let go of that idea earlier and say, what, we don't need to be a huge company, at least not yet, but, we would definitely do a lot better if with a few more engineers, 10 more engineers, now dozens more engineers. And getting over that, for me, the threshold was really like 12 to 15 people. Yeah. Just a year and change ago, at the beginning of 2000. What was it? The beginning of last year, 2011, we were 17 people. Really? Today we just passed 105. So most of those people joined in the last 6 months. And that was a big barrier for me to get through of just, okay, this is not the same little tight team that we always were, and I need to accept that, I don't get to write, I don't get to touch the code like I used to. I don't get to be there for every decision being made like I used to, and I need to really, trust and empower people more to, build this company that I'm proud of, that we're all proud of.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool. The fun part is a friend of mine is currently visiting New York, and he visited your office.
Good.
I actually read the blog post this morning. He took some photographs of your office as well. So it made me think, looking at the tech scene in New York, everybody's talking about Silicon Valley and San Francisco as it may be, but how would you describe the New York City tech scene? A lot of big players there as well. You guys?
I think it's just incredible. I think you see, the thing that I get the most excited about it is you see companies coming out of New York that I think are uniquely New York. Foursquare is, I think, a uniquely New York company. Tumblr, in that it comes from media, I think is a uniquely New York company. Etsy, something built around, trade and kind of a whole world of kind of craftsmen, I think is uniquely New York. There's just, I think, it's not as long a list as the companies coming out of the Valley today, but I think it's an extraordinary list of companies that I just think have a really unique taste and sensibility that I couldn't imagine coming from any other part of the world.
Did you ever ponder upon moving to the Valley?
So we've raised money, we've added 2 investors from Silicon Valley in the last year and a half. And both times they've, very politely asked, hey, your team is still small. Do you think you could convince them up and move to the Valley? Palo Alto is pretty cool. And I just, very politely, I grew up in New York City. I could not imagine doing this anywhere else in the world. Certainly could not imagine doing it in Palo Alto. I love New York. It's like nothing else.
So what's the big differentiator? The companies as well, the mentality?
So perhaps, New York is just a very different city than San Francisco and certainly Palo Alto. And I think that brings certain sensibilities and certain type of people with it. Interestingly, New York is a harder city to get a business off the ground, and just everything's a lot more expensive. People's commutes are just very different, depending on where you are. There's lots of different factors that come into play. But I think that selects for companies that are really determined to do it, that are just really excited and kind of like break through all the barriers. But the biggest kind of environmental difference, I think, particularly for a company like Tumblr, is rather than the West Coast where you're in the shadow of these big technology companies, you're in the shadow of Google, Facebook, Amazon, not Amazon out there, sorry, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, these huge technology companies in the Valley. New York, you're in the shadow of these huge, just behemoth media companies, Viacom, News Corp, these guys that, remind you that there is a world out there beyond just the tech first adopters, right? There's a world beyond the people who are, gung-ho on Twitter, or the 100 million people who are using Twitter today. There are these media companies that are used to dealing with the audiences in the hundreds of millions all over the world. So it kind of puts things in perspective. And for a media company like Tumblr, it's a really useful, I think it's a useful perspective, but it's also kind of a useful network to be close to, more than just being near other technology companies.
Okay. I want to throw a date at you and see how you respond. April 27th, 2010. A certain singer-songwriter called John Mayer decides to ditch Twitter and head over to Tumblr. And he calls it the future of social networking if you image of the future features intelligent discourse. I've seen your response at that day, but could you describe to us how that moment was for you?
It was extraordinary, actually, because he had kind of perfectly summed up stuff that we, one of the hardest things in a startup, and I think most founders will tell you this, most people working in a startup will tell you this, that just describing what you're doing coherently, not even like articulately, not even like eloquently, just coherently, sounding like you're not completely out of your mind when you're making that elevator pitch is really, really hard. And here John Mayer came along and kind of perfectly prioritized the things that actually mattered on Tumblr, the things that were actually unique about our network and that we felt were really special. And one of those things is that it's a uniquely kind of positive place, that it's a place where a creator can go and not only feel empowered, but also feel like they can connect with an audience that cares about what they're doing, appreciates what they're doing. And I think he just touched on that so perfectly in a way that I had been having such a hard time describing. It really helped. And actually, April 2010, that was a kind of a turning point for us in that we had just kind of come off of a year of really thinking about mainstream growth, looking at our onboarding, looking at a lot of things that definitely helped us, grow a bigger audience that ultimately created an even bigger opportunity for the creators on Tumblr. But that was also a time where we really came out after thinking about just growth, going, the stuff that really gets us out of bed early in the morning, the stuff that, makes this exciting for us, the thing that makes it so rewarding for us is serving the creators that are ultimately at the center of this, big network that we're building, empowering them to make their best work and coming into the office just totally surprised by how this community is using our tools. So, that moment, having John Mayer touch on what a great home this was for creators, really was a profound moment in Tumblr's history.
If we're fast forwarding to 2012, to the current situation, you have more than 53 million blogs.
I think so. I think that's the number.
I actually wrote down the number from last week, and it was 42 million. And then I saw the number of this morning. It was 53 million. So
that must have been an out-of-date number, but I don't think it's growing that quickly.
That quickly
but yes,
would be awesome.
Yeah,
but
I know we broke 50
I think
just a month ago.
What's really unique for me and what I really find fascinating to see is that you have a likability in the creativity, the creative industry worldwide. But what makes that so? What makes it so uniquely available and so likable for the creative industry?
So, when Tumblr was getting started, it was coming into a kind of an ecosystem of products that was, I think, pretty well divided between tools that made it really easy to post media, but were very kind of narrow in the media they were limited to. So, as an example, YouTube makes it incredibly easy to post videos. Flickr, incredibly easy to post photos. Twitter, incredibly easy to post a little quip or short idea or something. All of these tools that make it really, really easy to post one piece of media. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have these very robust tools that are incredibly powerful, give you a tremendous amount of control, like Blogger or WordPress today. You can do anything with those platforms, but they're actually very difficult to use when all you want to do is post a song that you have stuck in your head, when all you want to do is take a photo that you just took on your phone and get it onto your blog to share with your friends or your audience. And Tumblr, we tried to drop it right in the middle, saying that we wanted it to be easy to use as all of those single purpose platforms, but we want the full range of media. We want you to be able to do anything, express yourself any way you want on this platform, and we want to give you all of the control that you get on a hosted WordPress blog, on something that these big robust platforms offered, even though they made, I think, were a much higher burden to actually post and express yourself on them. So I think that was a recipe for a really expressive, creative community of people who were very underserved by both of those tools. Again, they could really do the hard work to set up a full-blown WordPress blog, or they could just save themselves limited to those specific channels. And when you look around at the kind of state of the web and creative tools on the web before Tumblr, people were maybe posting their songs to their MySpace page. They were, if they were music, if they were dance, they were posting stuff to YouTube. If they were comedians, they were probably using Twitter. Tumblr, I think most of these creators are people who have much more to express than just one medium. Somebody like John Mayer, who uses Tumblr not just for his music, but for, lyrics that he's working on. He uses it for a lot of his photography. He uses it to write these like brilliant essays on there. He like many creators, I think is just pouring with this kind of expression and art, and it's not really limited to one media. So I think a platform like Tumblr works for that community brilliantly.
So if you mentioned John Mayer, looking at the platform at the moment, I see a lot of other big names. We have Beyonce, Jay-Z, and recently had the Hollywood production at the Hunger Games, using the platform as a sort of teasing platform.
This actually made me so happy, because as far as brands using your product, so at this point it's pretty standard for a brand to have Facebook.com/Coca-Cola and @Coca-Cola. So to see a brand coming into Tumblr, not just doing the normal HungerGames.tumblr, they actually showed up into something I just think is absolutely brilliant. We take no credit for this. This was them and their creative agency's just brilliance, which was launching capitalcouture.tumblr.com, which was actually an exploration of the world of fashion in the Hunger Games. So this, for the fans of the Hunger Games, blew their minds, because this was an angle of the world that they didn't get to fully explore in the books. It was like a whole new dimension that they could really get into. And for people who hadn't discovered the Hunger Games yet, but were maybe really into fashion, this was some of the most innovative fashion to come along in years. And this was, some of the top talent in the fashion world designing fashion for the future, literally for this world of the future. Just fascinating. So this great exploration of the world of the Hunger Games, this great new genre of fashion for our fashion community to explore. It was just explosive on our network. It was unbelievably popular and just fascinating to see. And how much cooler is that than just HungerGames.tumblr, where they were posting the trailers or something like that. So loved it, absolutely loved it.
Did you ever come across issues with copyrighted materials?
Sure. So I mean, we from the very beginning have been incredibly aggressive about enforcement of this law in the U.S. called the DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. So basically, the way that works is when we get any notice from a copyright holder, that is, their photo appeared on Tumblr without their permission, we enforce that as quickly as humanly possible. We have a team of 30 people just dedicated to enforcement of, or just handling those support tickets and is, enforcing those, very aggressively. The trick, though, is that, most of these creators today, the sensibilities here have shifted pretty dramatically to where now the creators are, more than trying to hold their stuff in and control the distribution, they're trying to, well, I should say, letting their work be kind of relegated to certain gatekeepers. Instead, they want distribution far and wide. They want to build their own audiences and control those audiences themselves. And a platform like Tumblr for that is an incredibly empowering thing for a lot of these artists who are able to build up huge followings that can then be spun into a sold-out show, or into a book deal, or into a TV show, or into a feature film, as we see more and more on Tumblr.
More often.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, how do you keep the balance between being the underground reblog provider, as I usually see it, and that platform that celebrities use?
I think actually by focusing on the underground, I think by focusing on the indie, the aspirational creators, in a lot of ways, I think either can follow the other. That's my impression anyway, is if you have the influencers, if you have John Mayer using the platform in a really exciting way, all of the aspirational artists who follow John Mayer, the nice thing about artists is they kind of, the artists are fans themselves, so they follow each other, and they very closely watch what platforms other people are using, how they're using those platforms, what tools they're using. But I think it works just the same. If the indie guys are experimenting with whole new formats, whole new genres, whole new tools, believe me, the celebrities, the people at the top, the pop stars are going to be paying attention. And I think that's a lot of what you're seeing now was very organic. This came out of a community of aspirational, kind of up and coming talent and creators, and they did more and more impressive stuff with them, and started to show how there were whole new types of tools, whole new things to do with those tools, that now the known creators are showing up to do their take with. And the great thing is those icons, those stars, are known worldwide for a reason. They're extraordinarily talented themselves. So you give them a new tool like Tumblr to do something with, and you just look at the way they use this stuff. Really cool thing is, again, because Tumblr isn't limited to one type of media. You see somebody like John Mayer or Lady Gaga on Tumblr today, or Beyonce on Tumblr, and it's not just the song. It's not just the same stuff that we've seen from them previously. It usually comes out as a whole new side to who they are and their talents. So I love that.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of big names, the recent integration of the Open Graph by Facebook, that gave quite a spike if I'm looking at referral traffic. Am I right?
It always has, actually. So we, very early on, we were, being asked a lot of questions about, are we competitive with Twitter? What happens when, Facebook added some buttons along the top that looked a lot like our buttons, where you could post a status, post a photo, post a video. And, excuse me. We were getting more and more of these questions, and we were asking ourselves those same questions: is, are we worried that our timeline is a lot like Twitter's timeline? Are we worried that Facebook is going to want to handle more of this media and stuff? And we decided very early on that we were doing something really, really novel, and we were only going to be satisfied if we were doing something different from everybody else, and that meant that it would ultimately behoove us to just embrace all of these other platforms. So I think our second year or something, and maybe we 15, 16 months in, we did really pretty deep integration with Facebook and Twitter, where you could push all of your Tumblr content out to those networks, and we would do everything we could to make it look as good as possible on those other networks. And within a few months, we saw something huge. I mean, that to us just represented why that was so much the right thing to do. The referrals, the inbound traffic we were getting from Facebook and Twitter ended up just totally enveloping, or I should say shadowing, the inbound traffic we were getting from Google. So, normally something like WordPress gets 50% of the traffic ultimately driven from search referrals. That number was already a little bit lower on Tumblr because it was just so much more real time, so much of it was in network. But now all of a sudden we had Twitter and Facebook representing even more of our inbound traffic than search, which was awesome. And that's the way we look at all of these networks today. Is just a great opportunity to help those creators on Tumblr reach even more people, build even more of an audience. So we were a little overdue to do the Open Graph integration, to be honest, but I think we're very proud of how it went down, and we're thrilled to see as many people using it as they are.
Is serendipity your biggest advantage over Facebook?
Serendipity, that's a really interesting question. I think it's just a very, they might describe it as a very different graph. They've got a graph that represents people that you know in the world. On Tumblr today, I'm following maybe 500 blogs. Handful of those are people that I know in real life. And one nice thing about Tumblr is there's no obligation to follow people that you know in real life. And a lot of them are people that I've never met. They're people who I don't know. I don't know anything about the people. I don't know their gender. I don't know their name, anything about them. But I know that they have, similar tastes, or, we're sort of like-minded in some respect. And I love the stuff that they post. So it's some would call it an interest graph. I just think it's media. It's the stuff that we love rather than just the people that we know.
An interest graph.
Yeah,
that's an interesting term as well. So you're in the Netherlands for the internationalization
That's
project.
right. Yeah.
You've launched in Brazil and Portugal before, and I think you're adding up to 12 different languages now. There are even staff blogs in the countries in Brazil and Portugal.
Yes.
Why this focus on internationalization?
So, it's become clearer and clearer that as we're serving creators, the community of creators is certainly not just in the U.S. And interestingly, that by building a kind of international user base of creators, they can build an audience, or they can reach an audience across the entire world. That's especially true with things like photography, even film and music, are not limited to language, right? So writing obviously is going to be, writing and journalism is often a form of expression that's going to be broken up into markets, because it's going to be broken up per language. But so much of I can just say so many of the blogs that I'm following creators in the Netherlands and New Zealand and Japan today that make Tumblr a richer and richer experience for me. So it's very clearly become an international community, even without any intervention from us. So a lot of the international expansion isn't really an expansion so much as it's just kind of paying homage, trying to better serve that community that's been growing without us. So just to give you a little bit of context, for the first 3 years we were predominantly US, and we saw one shift happen and then kind of come back to the US as we just got the serious mainstream adoption about 1.5 years ago across America. That now has started to become really, international traffic was starting to chip away at that, and has now been pretty much completely overshadowed. U.S. traffic has now been nearly completely overshadowed by this international traction that we've gotten in a few markets. Europe, Brazil, as you mentioned, have kind of shown up all at once. We've seen much more mainstream adoption in even just the last 6 to 9 months, really. And today, international traffic represents as much as like 65% of all of our traffic.
Where does the growth come from?
So again, it was we'd always had users in Japan, we had users across Europe, we had some users in South Africa. We had these users across the board, but U.S. traffic had just continued to outpace it because we just had a more mainstream audience there. We just had more users en masse kind of signing up and using the service. What we've seen in the last year is that mainstream traction starting to happen overseas now. We've seen that start to happen in the Netherlands. We've seen that, I think we're kind of well into that in Brazil right now. Right. And, as you hit that kind of mainstream traction in more of these countries, as you can imagine, in mass across the world, that started to really overshadow the growth that we're seeing in the U.S.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what can we expect here in the Netherlands? Is it just the language change, or is there an office coming in the Netherlands, or are there sales teams coming to the Netherlands?
So we haven't started opening international offices just yet. Right now we're using kind of a distributed team of people all over the world to help us with not just translation. So actually translations is just one piece of the localization. You're able to, one thing I'm really, really proud of is email Tumblr support in Dutch now and get a response back in the native language, something that I love being able to do, just because we love having those open lines of communication. So knowing that we're just better able to communicate with this audience is really important to us. The other thing is some of the people down here from our team this week, or over here from our team, are actually on our editorial team. So this is our team in New York that is actually kind of telling stories, elevating the interesting creators in our community to draw more attention to them, to help them build the audiences that they really deserve. I mean, we have creators on Tumblr who are showing up brand new, doing just extraordinary stuff, who deserve huge amounts of attention for what they're doing. So anytime that we can help tell those stories, anytime we can help elevate those creators, we love to do that. So we built this editorial team in New York just a few months ago. So this is a new endeavor for us. But we've always tried to feature these guys as best we can, but we're now scaling up this team. We've got a distributed international team that we're working with to source these stories, to spend time with these creators. And in Dutch and in English, we're going to be publishing more and more of these stories about these great creators. So one of the things we're doing in the Netherlands this week is spending some time doing some of these interviews. And so we're on the other side of this too, actually interviewing some of the locals to tell more of those stories.
Cool. Yeah. So at this point, I would like to take some questions from Twitter.
Please.
I think we had some because my phone was ringing all the time. Let me see. Yay! I actually got some of the question already asked. I have to ask this question.
No, please.
So, what is your business model?
Business model, yeah. So you've seen a few of them already, actually. So a good chunk of them are already deployed, and we're in the process of scaling them up. So the big new one is a creative brand advertising set of brand advertising products that we've started to make available to advertisers. So that is in a few spaces on Tumblr, which were traditionally all editorial. So those were places where I was just mentioning, we're trying to tell more stories about creators. We had something called Tumblr Radar. We had something called Tumblr Tuesday, the Tumblr Spotlight. We have a few of these places where we feature great content on Tumblr. We're starting to make a fraction of that real estate, of that attention, available to advertisers who are showing up. We're selecting for those advertisers who have great content. Folks like Lionsgate with the Hunger Games, that has media and content that's really, really compelling to a whole lot of people and is really great at creating interesting content. Interestingly, this is something that a lot of advertisers, a lot of brands are very good at, particularly when you go out to Los Angeles and look at a lot of the entertainment industry. This is what they do for a living, and today they've been limited to little blue links on Facebook, Twitter, and Google. And we're one of the first big networks telling them to show up with your best content, to say that you're not limited to any type of media. You can do video, you can do film, or video, images, animation, any type of tech. You can really do this any way that you want, and build a presence on Tumblr any way that you want, that you're really in full control of. And it's something that a lot of these brands have been really excited about, and something that we've been able to find a set of really creative advertisers to work with. So anyway, advertising is one big bucket. And another one that I'm really, really proud of, just because of the sort of industry that's kind of materialized around it, is this theme garden, this theme marketplace that we have on Tumblr, that is basically, much like if you've got an Android or an iPhone, an Android phone or an iPhone today, and you can go into that app store and choose from hundreds of thousands of these great apps. Most of them are like $1 or $2. That's a billion-dollar business for Apple. It's a billion-dollar industry for those developers, and it means that for a couple bucks, you have a choice of all of these spectacular programs that you can permanently add to your phone that you have on you all the time, right? It's like just great for everybody involved. So on Tumblr, we sort of copied that model in this theme marketplace, where we have a bunch of developers who build these really beautiful themes for Tumblr. So these are just beautiful designs that you can use on your blog. You can go and choose from thousands of these beautiful themes for a really nominal price. You can pick one out, add it to your blog. They're incredibly well supported, incredibly customizable, beautiful, beautiful themes. That is, a $1 million business for Tumblr. It's also now a $1 million industry for these developers, some of who are, independent developers making, $100,000 a month from the royalties for these themes that they're building. We have one development shop up in Vancouver that's hiring. I think they're up to 14 developers now, just dedicated to making these beautiful and supporting these really beautiful Tumblr themes. That's an incredible thing to know that we're able to support this developer community that's working unbelievably hard to make great stuff for the rest of our community. What is just a wonderful thing for everybody involved.
I think the fun part was one of the questions I opened up questions on Monday, and one of the first questions I had was from someone who asked, "What's the next step for Tumblr going to be? Are they going to be more towards curation, so Pinterest way of life, or more the microblogging as it is and evolving in that direction?" And regarding Pinterest, one of the first things I said when I saw Pinterest for the first time is, that's a Tumblr team. There's a real lookalike Tumblr team available in the shop as well. But how do you see that? How do you see your content versus that of Pinterest, for instance? Because I see a lot of people I follow on Tumblr, sorry. They use the platform to just share snippets of things they come across. So how do you see the Pinterest versus Tumblr versus...
So, ultimately the thing that is so differentiating about Tumblr is at its core is a real creative community. People make stuff on Tumblr, and kind of outside of that core community is this great community of curators. And one of the things that I really admire, and it was an accident. It was a really lucky, really lucky accident. But that relationship between that core community of creators and that bigger community of curators is a really, I was going to say cooperative relationship. It's just an incredibly good relationship that they have in between each other, where the creators adore the curators because the curators kind of spread their stuff out far and wide. The average post on Tumblr is reblogged 9 times. That means that the average post doesn't appear on just your own blog, but appears on 10 blogs, 10 RSS feeds, 10 Facebook feeds, 10 Twitter timelines. That means when you're creating something on Tumblr, it gets pumped out far and wide. The curators adore the creators because they ultimately, that's their form of expression. So they have that really strong relationship, which is just kind of unlike anything else on the web. You don't have that, depending on who's counting, I've seen numbers that show, Pinterest content as high as 10% of it sourced from Tumblr. Ultimately this stuff is being made on Tumblr and distributed out into the internet, which is great. Again, as I mentioned before, that Twitter and Facebook integration has helped hugely for those creators on Tumblr building audiences. So I don't really care where the stuff ends up, so long as we're ultimately empowering those creators to make their best work.
You're empowering the creator, right.
Yeah.
Let's see. A lot of people going on. Let's see. It's a good one. In what other EU cities are you going to have an operation? So you're here in Amsterdam for now, so in Dutch translation. Are you going to other cities in Europe as well?
So we started to. So right now our sort of home base for all of our internationalization is in Berlin. We have Jenna Brinning, who's been running all of our international development and localization for the last 3 years out of Berlin. And now, again, it's a very distributed team, but we have a few more people in Berlin than we do anywhere else. And as a result, I've spent a fair amount of time in Berlin in the last couple of years. And we've absolutely, London. This is first trip to the Netherlands. Between London, Germany, we've been spending more and more time in Europe. We absolutely need to do more, and that's part of the reason we're 100 people today, where we were 20 just a year ago. We're trying to build up that team so we can have more people on the ground, spend more time with this community, so we can ultimately better serve this community. A lot of it is really just listening. A lot of it is just spending time with the people to see where the opportunities are, to understand what platforms we should be integrating with that we're not privy to, because there may be a predominantly UK platform, predominantly a Netherlands-based platform, or just in foreign languages. But also, understanding the communities better, so we know as an example, one of the big takeaways from our last trip to Brazil was just realizing that the way we're organizing content on Tumblr, you don't realize this necessarily, but it's very US-centric. It's not even English-centric, it's US-centric, the way that we divvy up music genres, the way that we select for different types of media, the way that we divvy up politics and news discussions. We realized, man, they have totally different genres of music in Brazil, or the popular genres of music look totally different than the popular genres of music in the US today. So
sure.
Things like that really, really do influence the way that we build this product.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do know you have a busy schedule here for the next week, so
really
we're wrapping up. So one last question.
Please.
In that busy schedule of yours, do you have any time to check those 500 Tumblr blogs you're following?
I absolutely do, yeah. I'm fortunate to get to beta test our new mobile app, actually. So I've been sending a lot of notes back to our engineers this week, because I've been using the site on my phone pretty much nonstop, yeah.
What's your favorite Tumblr blog at the moment?
A little bit selfishly now, because I was featured on it a couple weeks ago. My girlfriend and I were featured on it, but a blog called Humans of New York, which is just this extraordinary thing that's blown up in the last couple months on Tumblr, has now copycats popping up all over the world. It's basically this really talented portrait photographer that goes around taking photos of interesting, sometimes really obscure, sometimes just sort of out there New Yorkers. And writing, just sometimes brief captions, sometimes like long stories about who these people are. And the portraits are gorgeous, the people are fascinating, the stories around them are just so thoughtful and lovely. And what he started doing now, is they've built up this big following, is most of the people he's going out to photograph are actually submissions that he receives. So he gets these letters from people, sometimes they're just a short, like, you got to go check this guy out, he's on the corner of such and such street in Brooklyn, every other day, and has, great, I don't know, makes great food, tells great stories, whatever it is. And then he'll go and take the portrait and then publish the portrait with the story that was sent in. So just these great, really rich stories of really fascinating New Yorkers. And now you're starting to see humans of Paris, humans of Sao Paulo, etc. Yeah.
That's creative. That's
awesome.
I love it. Awesome. It's very awesome.
Yeah, it's just stuff that didn't exist before.
So I want to thank you once again for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you're having a good launch at the Amsterdam party tomorrow. I think you're launching at here in Amsterdam.
That's right. Yep.
Pretty cool. So
looking forward to spending some time with some Tumblr users.
I know,
yeah, some
a lot of interviews planned.
What's that?
A lot of interviews planned here as well with the users.
Oh yes, absolutely. Spending time with a few of our more popular, influential creators here. Yeah, as I mentioned, we're doing some interviews with them too for our editorial pieces. So yeah, really looking forward to more time in the Netherlands.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kijk, dames en heren, dat is voor vandaag hetgeen wat we te melden hebben. Wij sluiten af. Bedankt voor het kijken als je live hebt gekeken. Kijk je on demand. Wens ik je heel veel plezier met het terugkijken. En wens ik je nog een fijne dag. En tot de volgende keer.